Faith Mercer stood at the airline counter in Phoenix, still wearing her Navy hospital scrubs. Her braid had nearly come apart, her shoes hurt, and the cracked screen of her phone showed the last call from Linda Harper, her mother's neighbor in Santa Fe. "Your mother is in the ambulance now," Linda had said. "They think it was her heart. Come as fast as you can." Faith had been trying ever since. "I'm sorry," the airline employee said. "The last seat tonight is almost $3,000. Faith stared at her, as though the number might change if she waited long enough. "I don't have that. The first flight tomorrow morning is cheaper." "How much?" the employee told her. Faith closed her eyes. "I don't have that either." She had emptied her account buying the first part of the trip. She had called a pawn shop inside the airport and sold the small earrings her mother had given her years earlier. She had checked every credit card. There was nothing left. "Is there anyone who can send you money?" the employee asked gently. Faith shook her head. "I'm an only child. My father died when I was 15. My mother is the family I have left." The employee looked genuinely sorry, which somehow made Faith feel worse. Behind her, passengers shifted impatiently. A few looked at their phones. Others looked around her as if tears were simply another delay at the airport. Faith had spent 12 hours in an emergency department before receiving Linda's call. She had changed dressings, calmed frightened relatives, helped stabilize a man after a highway accident, and explained to a child that the needle would hurt only for a moment. Now she could not solve her own emergency. "I can wait for the morning flight," she whispered, mostly to herself. But she knew what 7 more hours could mean. A man sitting several yards away rose from his chair. He was somewhere in his late 40s, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked expensive but tired. A leather briefcase rested beside him. He had heard enough. "We'll go together," he said. Faith turned. "I'm sorry?" "We'll go together." He stepped closer without crowding her. "My name is Ethan Barrett. I have a plane in the private hangar. I'm flying to Santa Fe for work. We leave soon." Faith stared at him. "I don't know you." "That's true. And you expect me to get on a private plane with you?" "No. I expect you to be suspicious." That answer surprised her. Ethan took out his phone. "I'll give you my full name, my company's number, my assistant's number, the pilot's name, anything you want to verify. You can send all of it to someone." Faith almost laughed. "There's no one to send it to." Something changed in his expression. "Then call the hospital and give them the information. Call airport security. Ask the airline employee if she knows who I am." The employee behind the counter suddenly leaned forward. "Mr. Barrett?" Ethan glanced toward her. "Yes." She seemed to recognize him. Faith still did not move. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Ethan looked at her uniform. "Because you are trying to reach your mother, and because I have empty seats." "People don't just do things like this." "Maybe they should." Faith wiped her face. "My mother had a serious cardiac episode. She's in intensive care. I've been awake almost 18 hours. I already spent everything I had trying to get there." "What does your mother call you?" The question caught her off guard. "Faith." "And her name?" "Alice." Ethan picked up Faith's small suitcase. "Then let's get Faith to Alice." She reached for the handle. "Wait." He stopped immediately. Faith searched his face. "Are you absolutely sure?" "I lost my mother because I arrived too late." His answer came quietly. "I am very sure." For the first time, Faith saw that his offer had nothing to do with money. She took one long breath. "Okay." Ethan nodded toward the secured corridor. "Then we should move." As they walked, Faith looked back at the counter, where, only moments earlier, she had believed her night had ended. Instead, a stranger was carrying her suitcase toward a plane. "Thank you," she said. "Save that for later." For when? Ethan opened the door leading toward the private terminal. When we get you there in time. The private hangar smelled of fuel, cold metal, and desert rain. A small white jet waited under bright lights while ground workers completed the final checks. Faith stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I have never done anything like this. Neither had I, until my work became ridiculous, Ethan said. That almost made her smile. Inside, everything seemed too quiet. Soft leather seats, warm lights, polished wood, bottled water, arranged neatly in a cabinet. Faith suddenly became conscious of her old hospital bag, with its worn handles and the stethoscope hanging halfway out of it. An older pilot appeared from the cockpit. "Owen Parker," he said. "We'll be in Santa Fe in under an hour, if the weather cooperates." "Is the weather bad?" "Some storms farther east. Nothing unusual, but we may feel a little turbulence." Faith nodded. A crew member handed her a blanket. She almost refused automatically. Then she caught herself. "Thank you." For 6 years, Faith had been the person handing blankets to others. Receiving one felt strangely difficult. The jet began moving. Ethan sat across from her. "How long have you been a nurse?" 6 years. "Emergency care?" "For most of it." "Do you like it?" Faith looked through the window. "Most days." "And the bad days?" "On the bad days, you don't ask whether you like it. You just keep moving." She told him about understaffed shifts that stretched far beyond what had been scheduled. She told him about a building fire the previous week when she had worked so long she could barely remember eating. "Why emergency care?" Ethan asked. "I started at a private clinic. It was calmer. But I hated watching money decide who got care quickly." She rubbed her hands together. "In the emergency department, people arrive scared, angry, bleeding, confused. Nobody asks whether their life is convenient first." Ethan studied her. "And who takes care of you?" Faith gave a tired laugh. "Usually nobody." He did not laugh with her. She looked away. "My mother moved to Santa Fe 3 years ago after retiring. She wanted a quieter place. She liked the light there." "Did you know she had heart trouble?" "For 2 years." Faith's voice tightened. "The cardiologist wanted her to have a procedure. She kept refusing." "Why?" "My father died during surgery. After that, hospitals never felt safe to her." "But you're a nurse." "I know." Faith looked down at her hands. "I explained everything. Risks, benefits. What could happen if she waited? I thought knowing the medical side would help." "It didn't?" "Knowing isn't the same as being able to remove someone's fear." The plane gained altitude. Faith pressed her head against the seat. "Every Sunday, Linda checks Mom's blood pressure. I review the numbers. I remind her about medication. I call if anything looks wrong. You've been caring for her from another state." "I've been trying." Her eyes filled again. "This afternoon Linda called while I was working. She said Mom collapsed in the kitchen. Why didn't you leave immediately?" "I had patients." Ethan frowned slightly. Faith understood why. "I couldn't disappear without handing them over safely. There were people receiving medications, one patient waiting for transfer, another whose condition was unstable. I spent almost an hour making sure someone had everything. While your mother was being taken to a hospital." "Yes. And then?" "I ran." She almost laughed at the memory. "I ran to the bank. I ran to the bus station, saw the trip would take too long, then ran to the airport. I bought what I could afford." Her voice cracked. "And eventually, I ran out of things to sell." Ethan leaned back. "You seem practiced at solving everybody's problems except your own." Faith looked at him. "That's part of the job." "No." His reply was quiet. "That's something else." "What?" "A way of never needing anyone." Faith stiffened. "You don't know me." "You're right." Ethan glanced at the dark window. "But I know the habit." Because you have it too? Mine looks different. He turned his phone face down when it buzzed. I hide inside meetings, construction projects, flights, contracts. I make myself so busy there isn't enough room left to notice what hurts. Faith watched the unanswered phone. Aren't you going to take that? No. It could be important. Ethan looked at her. Nobody calling me right now has a mother fighting for her life. The cabin fell quiet. For once, Faith had nothing to do. No monitor to read, no medicine to administer, no chart to complete. Only waiting. And across from her sat a man who seemed to understand that waiting could hurt more than work. After they reached cruising altitude, Ethan loosened his tie. My mother died 4 years ago. Faith lifted her eyes. He had not been looking at her when he said it. Cancer. We found it late. I'm sorry. I was in Europe closing a deal. His fingers moved toward an old wristwatch he wore beside the expensive one Faith had noticed earlier. Everyone told me there was time. Then my sister called and said there wasn't. Faith remained silent. I got on the first flight home. There were delays, weather, connections, all the things people curse when they think their schedule is the most important thing happening in the world. His mouth tightened. I arrived after she died. Faith looked at the worn watch. Was that hers? Ethan nodded. My sister gave it to me at the hospital. I've worn it ever since. Did you get to speak to your mother before the flight? Not really. He stared down at his hands. I thought I would tell her everything when I arrived. Everything. Faith knew what that meant. Thank you. I'm sorry. I love you. Please stay. Words people saved because they assumed tomorrow would be available. My sister held her hand, Ethan said. Mom kept asking when I would arrive. She wasn't angry. Apparently that made it worse. Why? Because anger would have given me something to defend myself against. He smiled without humor. Instead, she just waited for me. Faith felt a weight behind her ribs. So when you heard me at the airport, I heard myself 4 years ago. Ethan finally looked directly at her. I wasn't being generous, Faith. I couldn't watch another plane leave with the wrong person sitting inside it. A crew member brought sandwiches, fruit, coffee, and tea. Faith looked at the tray. That's it? Ethan raised an eyebrow. What were you expecting? I don't know. Caviar? He laughed. It was the first real laugh she had heard from him. My mother made sandwiches like these when I was a kid. Having money never made them taste better. Faith took one. What does your company do? Construction. Houses? We started with affordable housing. Then offices, clinics, hospitals. Hospitals? A few. Ethan smiled slightly. For all I know, my company built part of the hospital your mother is in. Faith shook her head. That would be absurd. Life has terrible timing and strange symmetry. She ate slowly. For the first time since leaving work, she realized how hungry she was. Tell me about Alice, Ethan said. That changed Faith immediately. She sews constantly. Curtains, blankets, things nobody asked her to repair. Stubborn? Unbelievably. Faith smiled. When I was 9, I fell out of a tree and broke my arm. Mom sat beside me in the emergency department and explained every sound, every tool, everything the doctor was doing. She wasn't frightened. She was terrified. I know that now. But she wanted me to feel safe. Faith looked at her stethoscope. She used to say taking care of someone is one of the purest ways to love them. That explains you. It also ruined me a little. Ethan waited. Faith sighed. 2 years ago, I had pneumonia. Serious pneumonia. If I'd been my own patient, I would have admitted myself. But you didn't. I stayed home alone and went back to work before I was well. Why? I didn't want anyone to know I couldn't handle things. Who would have cared? Faith thought. I don't know. That's not what I asked. She looked at him. Nobody had ever challenged that answer before. "I've made myself useful for so long," she said, "that I don't know who I am when nobody needs something from me." The cabin became very quiet. Ethan nodded slowly. "That's familiar. Who are you when nobody needs something?" "I don't know." That honesty softened something between them. The jet lights dimmed. Faith pulled the blanket higher. "I hate that I accepted your help so quickly." "You didn't." "I almost didn't." That would have been pride. Maybe. Or fear. She looked at him. Fear of what? Finding out that letting someone help doesn't make you weaker. Faith considered that. "Do you ever let anyone help you?" "Almost never." "Then you're giving advice you don't follow." Apparently that's another thing we have in common. For several minutes they said nothing. Then the pilot's voice came over the speaker. "We're approaching rough weather. Please keep your seatbelts fastened." Outside the window, distant lightning broke across the dark horizon. Faith's smile disappeared. She reached for her phone. No signal. Her mother was somewhere beneath that storm, waiting. The first hard jolt threw Faith against her seatbelt. She grabbed the armrest. Ethan looked toward the cockpit but stayed calm. Another burst of turbulence shook the cabin. "Is this normal?" Faith asked. "For storms like this?" "You don't sound convinced." "I've learned that lying to frightened people rarely helps." The pilot spoke again. They would need to slow down and circle until a safer path opened into Santa Fe. Faith's face went pale. "How long?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know." She tried calling Linda. Nothing. Again. No signal. Again. Still nothing. "I need to know whether Mom is alive." "I know." "You don't know." The words came harder than Faith intended. "You have a private plane. You know hospital directors. You probably know people who could move half this city with a phone call, and none of it can make this plane land." She stopped. Shame crossed her face immediately. "I'm sorry." Ethan did not flinch. "If money could control storms, I'd have bought clear skies 4 years ago." Faith covered her mouth. "I'm really sorry. You are scared. You can be angry at me if you need somewhere to put it." The jet dropped sharply. Faith closed her eyes. Ethan held out his hand. "Take it." She did. "Breathe with me." He counted slowly while she inhaled and exhaled. Faith almost smiled through her fear. "I'm usually the one telling people to breathe. Tonight you're off duty." "No nurse is ever completely off duty." "Then consider me temporary staff." That made her laugh once, weakly. The turbulence continued. "I've been with dying patients," Faith whispered. "I've sat beside strangers when their families couldn't arrive. I've held people's hands while monitors changed." She swallowed. "I always thought I understood what their families felt. And now? I understood the medicine, not this." She lifted the useless phone. "This helplessness. Waiting while someone you love is somewhere you cannot reach." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Waiting is its own kind of work. How did you survive the flight when your mother was dying?" "Badly." He gave a tired smile. "I argued with airport staff, offered money, demanded supervisors, walked around like rage could make an airplane faster. Did anything help? No. Nothing? Eventually, I stopped trying to control what couldn't be controlled." Faith looked surprised. "You?" "I didn't say I learned the lesson gracefully." Another jolt. She tightened her grip. "Talk to me," Ethan said. "About what?" "Anything." "Why?" "Because I spent that flight in silence. The silence stayed with me longer than the delay." Faith stared at the seat in front of her. Then she began. "The first time I started an intravenous line by myself, my hand shook so badly, my supervisor had to steady my wrist." "How old were you?" 22. "You thought you would get fired." I was sure of it. What did she say? That trembling meant I understood the responsibility. Faith smiled faintly. She said I should worry the day hurting someone stopped frightening me. And now? My hands still shake sometimes. I've just learned how to hide it. Where do you sleep after those long shifts? Sometimes in the staff room. Instead of going home, there's nobody there. The words came out before she could soften them. Faith looked embarrassed. It's easier to stay where I'm useful than go home to an empty apartment. Ethan waited before asking the next question. Who asks how you are? My coworkers. No. They ask how your shift went. They ask whether a patient improved. Who asks how Faith is? She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Finally she said, nobody. The admission hurt more than she expected. Not even me, she added. Ethan nodded. Then start there. How? Ask yourself occasionally. And if I don't like the answer, tell someone. Who? You could tell me. She turned toward him. After tonight? If you want? Faith looked down at their joined hands. The storm still shook the aircraft, but the fear felt different now. Not smaller. Shared. Then the pilot announced that a landing window had opened. The jet began descending. Faith's phone still showed no signal. She whispered her mother's name. Alice. Again. Alice. As if saying it could keep a heart beating on the ground below them. The wheels hit the runway hard. Before the jet had fully slowed, Faith's phone came alive. Missed calls. Several of them. All from the hospital. Her hands trembled as she called back. My name is Faith Mercer. My mother is Alice Mercer. She's in intensive care. You called me. The woman on the other end paused. Faith stopped breathing. Your mother had a serious complication about half an hour ago. The medical team is with her now. Please come as quickly as you can. The line ended. Ethan was already standing. A driver waited outside in the rain. Regional Medical Center, Ethan said. The vehicle pulled away. Faith stared through the wet glass. She's alive, she repeated. Ethan did not offer false certainty. We're going to her. 15 minutes later, Faith ran through emergency doors into a world she knew better than her own apartment. Monitor alarms. A crash cart rolling down a corridor. A physician giving short instructions. Nurses moving quickly without wasting motion. Under any other circumstance, Faith would have understood exactly where she belonged. Now she was family. I'm Alice Mercer's daughter, she told the reception nurse. I'm also a nurse. Please tell me where she is. The nurse checked the screen. Before she could answer, Faith saw a gurney moving across the hallway. Gray hair. Small frame. Her mother. Mom! Faith ran beside the bed. For several seconds, no one stopped her. She pressed her stethoscope to her mother's chest while they moved. There it was. Weak. Irregular. But there. You're here, Faith whispered. You're still here. The doors to the resuscitation area closed. Faith remained outside, holding the stethoscope. For years, she had told families the same sentence. Please wait here. We'll update you as soon as we can. Only now did she understand how heavy those words were. What do I do? She asked Ethan. Nothing. I hate that answer. I know. A young doctor emerged. Faith stood immediately. Please don't soften anything because I'm her daughter. Tell me exactly what happened. Severe arrhythmia. She briefly lost her pulse, but she responded to treatment. She's unconscious now, and we need time. Faith's knees weakened. Ethan caught her by the shoulders. I have you. Can I see her? Not yet, the doctor said. As soon as she's stable enough. When he left, Faith covered her face. I arrived late. No. I did. You heard her heart. That doesn't mean. You heard it beating. Ethan held her gaze. Don't turn that into nothing. Faith lowered her hands. A few minutes later, Ethan stepped away and made a call. Faith barely noticed until a senior cardiologist arrived with additional staff. "Dr. Samuel Reed," he said, "will review your mother's condition personally." Faith looked past him at Ethan. "What did you do?" "Made a call." "To whom?" "The hospital administrator." "You didn't have to." "I know." His answer sounded familiar. Faith almost cried again. While doctors worked, Ethan called his sister. Emily answered sleepily. "Ethan, what's wrong?" "Nothing with me." He looked toward Faith. "I'm at a hospital with someone I met tonight. Her mother nearly died." There was silence. "Why are you telling me?" "Because 4 years ago you stayed with Mom while I was trying to get home." His voice lowered. "I couldn't change that night. But tonight, I had a chance to stay for somebody else." Emily breathed out slowly. "Then stay." "I am." "And Ethan?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you called." When he returned, Faith was sitting beneath a fluorescent light, with her hands empty in her lap. A night nurse named Teresa offered her coffee. "Emergency nurse?" Teresa asked, noticing the stethoscope. "Yes." "Then you already know waiting is the worst assignment." Faith nodded. "Is Dr. Reed good?" "Very." Teresa smiled. "He doesn't give up easily on a heart." After she left, Faith leaned back. "My hands feel useless." Ethan sat beside her. "Then give me one." She did. For the next several hours, that was all either of them could do. Wait. But Faith was beginning to understand that waiting beside someone was not the same as doing nothing. Linda answered on the first ring. "Faith?" "She's stable for now." Linda began crying. "Thank God. Thank you for staying with her until the ambulance came." "Of course I stayed. Your mother has been feeding me soup every time I sneeze for 3 years. She wasn't getting rid of me that easily." Faith laughed softly. The sound surprised her. When she hung up, Ethan was still there. "You had a meeting in Santa Fe, didn't you?" "Cancelled." "Important?" "Yesterday I thought so." He leaned back. Meetings move, mothers don't. Faith rested her head against the wall. "You don't have to keep staying." "I know. You're repeating yourself. Because you keep acting as though help requires justification." She looked at him. "What if I'm not good at receiving it?" "Practice." Faith closed her eyes. Sometime later, she woke beneath Ethan's jacket. She sat up sharply. "How long?" "Not long." "Why didn't you wake me?" "Because nothing changed." "What if a doctor came?" "I was awake." Faith stared at him. "Someone needed to watch over you for a while." Those words reached somewhere no reassurance had reached. "I can't remember the last time somebody did that." Ethan folded his hands. "Maybe that's a problem." Before Faith could answer, the doors opened. Dr. Reed walked toward them. His face was tired, but different. "Better. Her rhythm has stabilized," he said. "She's responding well." Faith stood. "Can I see her?" "Yes." She entered the room slowly. The monitor beside the bed showed a steady rhythm. For the first time in her career, Faith looked at a stable monitor and cried. Alice opened her eyes. Confusion came first. Then recognition. "Faith." Faith took her mother's hand. "I'm here." "You came." "Of course I came." Alice's voice was weak. "Linda said you couldn't get a ticket." "I couldn't." "Then how?" Faith looked toward the door. Ethan waited outside, clearly trying not to intrude. "Someone helped me." Alice followed her gaze. "Him?" Faith nodded. "A stranger from the airport." Alice's tired mouth lifted. "He doesn't look like a stranger anymore." Ethan heard and smiled. Faith motioned him inside. "Alice Mercer, this is Ethan Barrett." "The man with the airplane?" Apparently that's my official title now, Ethan said. Alice studied him. Why did you bring my daughter? Because she needed to be here. That's all? That's enough. Alice squeezed Faith's hand. I always told you caring for people is a way of loving them. I remember. You listened too well. Faith laughed through her tears. What does that mean? You learned how to care for everyone except yourself. Alice glanced toward Ethan. Maybe this man was sent to annoy some sense into you. I've been trying, Ethan said. Alice smiled. Dr. Reed entered a little later and explained that once Alice recovered from the immediate crisis, they needed to discuss definitive treatment for her heart condition. Faith expected resistance. Instead, Alice remained quiet. Finally, she said, I'll do it. Faith stared. What? I'll have the procedure. Mom, are you sure? Alice nodded. I nearly died because I kept protecting an old fear. Her eyes moved toward Ethan. Your father died in surgery, and I've treated that memory like proof that every operating room is dangerous. She took a breath. But refusing help can be dangerous too. Ethan looked down. Alice noticed the old watch on his wrist. Someone important? My mother. Still alive. No. I'm sorry. I arrived too late when she died. Alice studied him for several seconds. Then thank you for making sure my daughter didn't. Ethan's composure finally broke. He looked away. Faith stood and placed her stethoscope in his hands. Hold this. What? Just hold it. She bent over the bed and embraced her mother. For years, that stethoscope had been her armor. If she was wearing it, she knew what role to play. Nurse. Helper. The calm one. Now Ethan held it while Faith held Alice. No diagnosis. No instructions. No responsibility beyond being a daughter. Alice stroked her hair. You made it, sweetheart. Faith cried without apologizing. Yes. Outside the hospital windows, the storm had passed. For the first time all night, she stopped watching the clock. Alice underwent treatment several weeks later. The procedure went well. During recovery, Faith used vacation days she had accumulated and almost never taken. At first, she spent them behaving like a nurse, checking medication labels twice, asking too many questions, and watching Alice's blood pressure with unnecessary intensity. Finally, Alice pushed the monitor away. Sit down and have breakfast with me. I am monitoring you. No, you're hiding. From what? Being my daughter. Faith stared at her. Alice patted the chair. Sit. Faith did. Linda arrived carrying cinnamon bread and immediately sided with Alice. Your mother is right. You two are dangerous together. We've had years of practice. Faith laughed. Ethan continued visiting. Not every day. Not dramatically. He simply became present. Some weekends he flew Faith to Santa Fe. Other times he drove. He brought Alice books instead of expensive gifts, after discovering she disliked anything that made her feel indebted. Teresa, the night nurse, occasionally joined them for coffee after her shifts. Dr. Reed became Alice's regular cardiologist. The circle around Faith slowly grew. Ethan's life changed too. One Sunday, he called his father, Edward. They had spoken only occasionally since his mother's death. Come to dinner, Ethan said. His father was silent. Is something wrong? No. Then why? Because nothing has to be wrong. Edward came. The dinner was awkward. Then less awkward. Eventually, Ethan told him about Faith and Alice. His father listened. When Ethan finished, Edward said, Your mother would have liked them. It was the first time they had spoken about her without ending the conversation immediately. Months after the airport night, Faith and Ethan returned to Phoenix together. At the terminal, Faith noticed a young woman crying near an airline counter. She was holding a garment bag. Faith slowed. Ethan noticed. What? That woman. They approached. Are you okay? Faith asked. The woman wiped her face. I missed my connection. My sister is getting married tomorrow morning. The replacement ticket is more than I have. Faith looked at Ethan. He was already reaching for his phone. She laughed. What? The woman asked. Nothing. Faith smiled. We're flying in that direction. The woman looked suspicious. Faith understood perfectly. You don't know us. You shouldn't trust strangers automatically. You can verify everything first. Ethan handed over identification and contact information without being asked. The woman looked between them. Why are you doing this? Faith thought about the answer. Months earlier, she might have said, because Ethan was wealthy, or because the plane had empty seats. Neither was the truth. Because somebody did it for me. The woman began crying again. Faith took her hand. A kindness like this isn't something you repay to the same person. What do you do then? You pass it forward when your turn comes. Later, after the woman had called her sister, Ethan and Faith sat near the window overlooking the runway. You're getting good at stealing my line, Ethan said. What line? We'll go together. Faith smiled. You don't own it. No? No. It belongs to whoever needs to hear it next. Ethan took her hand. Faith no longer wondered whether accepting his help that first night had made her weak. She knew better now. For years, she had mistaken independence for strength. They were not the same thing. Strength could mean standing alone when necessary. But it could also mean recognizing when standing alone served no purpose. She had spent her adult life believing usefulness made her worthy of love. Now she was learning something more difficult. People could care for her even when she was tired, even when she could not fix anything, even when all she had to offer was her presence. That knowledge changed the way she worked. She still cared deeply. She simply stopped believing that caring required disappearing inside everyone else's needs. Years later, Faith would remember very little about the price displayed on the airport screen, the rain against the jet, or the exact words the doctors used that night. What stayed with her were smaller things. Ethan carrying her worn suitcase without asking for anything, the blanket placed around her shoulders, Linda answering the phone before the first ring had finished, Teresa bringing terrible hospital coffee, and Alice opening her eyes and saying only, "You came." Age eventually taught Faith that the most important moments of a life rarely announce themselves as important. They arrive disguised as ordinary choices. Answer the call. Sit beside someone. Cancel the meeting. Stay 5 minutes longer. Ask a person how they are, and wait long enough to hear the real answer. She had once believed kindness belonged mostly to people who had plenty to spare. Ethan had money and a plane, so his help seemed enormous. But with time she understood that the airplane was only the visible part. His true gift had been attention. Hundreds of travelers had passed her that night. Ethan was simply the one who noticed and decided her pain mattered. That lesson became more important as Alice grew older. There were appointments, slower walks, repeated stories, forgotten names, good months and difficult ones. Faith could not stop time. No nurse could. No wealthy businessman could. No doctor could bargain with it. What they could do was refuse to waste the time that remained. Ethan rebuilt his relationship with his father, one dinner at a time. Faith learned to take days off without guilt. Alice learned to ask for help before a crisis forced her to. Linda continued arriving with food nobody had requested. Teresa became a friend rather than merely the nurse from a terrible night. And whenever Faith met someone struggling alone, she remembered what her mother had tried to teach her. Caring was not a transaction. It was not a debt ledger. The deepest kindness could never be balanced perfectly, because that was never its purpose. Someone carried you for part of the road, and later you carried someone else. Faith also stopped treating vulnerability as failure. Growing older showed her that nearly every strong person she admired had eventually needed a hand getting out of bed, a ride to an appointment, money during a difficult month, someone to listen after midnight, or simply another person sitting beside them while there was nothing useful to say. No one survives life entirely by themselves. The fortunate ones learn that before loneliness teaches it cruelly. Whenever Faith returned to an airport and heard the announcements echoing above the crowds, she sometimes remembered the exhausted nurse she had once been, crying beside a suitcase and believing she had reached the end of every option. She wished she could speak to that younger version of herself. She would not tell her to be stronger. She had already been strong for too long. She would tell her something gentler. You do not always have to carry everything. Sometimes another person will appear with an open seat, an open hand, or simply enough patience to remain beside you. When that happens, do not let pride send the help away. And when life becomes kinder again, remember the gift. Look around. Someone else may be standing at their own impossible counter, thinking they have reached the end. Walk toward them. Ask what happened. And if you can, say the words that once changed everything for Faith. We'll go together.